Hi, my name is Lisa Cowan, and I want to welcome you here today. I am a third generation New Yorker, a mother, sister, wife, cousin, member of many communities. I also work for a foundation that supports leaders of New York City organizations. And I wanted to welcome you to this vigil created uniquely for us by our friends at Reimagine. I don't need to tell you that the weight of the world is heavy right now. It's been heavy for a long time, and new challenges keep getting thrown our way. I know many of you are taking care of grief-stricken communities while supporting staff, boards, families, and dealing with your own feelings. It's challenging for leaders to find the right way to respond to local and global events, and I know that caregivers need care too. As we go from one crisis or tragedy to the next, we don't take enough time or space to truly feel our feelings, or at least I know I don't. Sitting with our grief can help us to heal faster, to reconnect with love, and build resiliency for the next tragedy that inevitably unfolds. In my role supporting leaders across New York City, I've been seeing so much confusion, stress, grief, and overwhelmedness. I mean, for years, really, and especially since the events of October 7th and their tragic aftermath. As I often do in times of crisis, I reached out to my friend, Reverend Emma Jordan Simpson, and Emma brought our questions to Reimagine for support in creating a space to mourn and grieve with peers. Reimagine is a nonprofit that helps all people face adversity, loss, and mortality and channel the hard parts of life into meaningful action and growth. They've hosted over 100 vigils since the beginning of the pandemic, and today they're offering us this time and space for two connected reasons. First, to offer an experience of collective mourning to a specific community of New York City leaders. And second, to provide a model and inspiration for how all of you might support your organizations and communities, both in this moment and in any future traumatic experiences which may come. I'd love to hand this to Brad to take us into our time today. And again, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for ushering this vigil in and for having the vision for leaders in New York City to come together in this moment, to be with one another, to imagine what's possible when we think about our response to grief and pain. My name is Brad Wolf. I'm the executive director and founder of Reimagine. And these vigils, uh, as Lisa mentioned, we've hosted now over 100 vigils in the last couple of years, over 3,500 virtual events. The goal we've had is to make sure that everyone has an accessible space to begin processing loss and grief in community in ways that are open to everyone, to meet people where they are, and to create this intentional pause in our life before moving into, or what so often is the case, freeze, fight, flight. These are the responses that most of us, or so many of us, I know myself, I'm often in response to the pain, both on an individual level and also on this collective level. And so by taking a pause here together, uh, and doing so with ritual and creativity at the center, we believe that there's a new, better way of responding to these moments. And so these spaces, these vigils, began as really a response to a need that we saw to openly acknowledge and to share collective grief, creating this pause to be with, rather than really brushing over what is happening not only around us, but in us, and with love in our hearts. So as we come together for this vigil, it's a powerful reminder that now more than ever, people need access to these types of experiences. And so as we progress through the program that we're going to share with you over the next 80 minutes, our hope really here is to do two things. One is to give all of us this collective experience, and along the way, might be slightly different than the other 100 vigils we've hosted. We want to give you a little bit of a sneak peek along the way about the different sections of the vigil that are emergent, so you in your brains can also have a subtle nod to ways that you might imagine offering something different or similar to your own communities, and brainstorm for yourself. How might you, if you haven't already done so, hold space for your own communities in taking intentional time to mourn, to grieve all that's happening. And so, we see that these are opportunities and places where we want to foster dialogue around living and dying, about death and loss, about grief and sorrow, but also about joy. And we've noticed over and over that when these often taboo topics are allowed to breathe, people feel more connected to themselves and each other, and we can build community in the process. And there are obviously so many kinds of loss, which can seem big or small. There's loss of life, loss of love, loss of home, loss of jobs, opportunities, and dreams. And we know that loss can be both personal and very private, and it can also be global and very collective. Each loss deserves attention, and we hope here to hold space for all of it. We're also aware that this is indeed a period of great turmoil, of fear, of anguish, and we recognize this is a highly politicized moment. There are many different views on all that is unfolding. We also recognize that both what we say as well as what we do not say can have meaning and may be difficult for some. We encourage all of us on this call to recognize that we have all come here today with some kind of pain in our hearts, and our hope is to simply provide a safe community in which we honor the mission of Reimagine to help people of all backgrounds face loss, adversity, and mortality to create a more compassionate world. Now, we'd like to begin just by level setting for everyone to make sure everyone is familiar with the features from an accessibility standpoint. So many people at this point are familiar with Zoom, but just to make sure that everyone is leveled up together here, we are going to be using the mute button and unmute button at the end of the session for breakouts. So we are very excited that we're going to have the opportunity to discuss some of these things in community later on in this session. We really invite you to turn your cameras on if you're able. It's so nice to see human faces in these digital experiences, but if you cannot, that is okay. Now, we are going to be holding an honor ceremony as part of this experience, and I want to invite you right now, if you don't have one handy, this is the perfect time to go grab a candle. It's not mandatory for the experience, but it is so nice to all light candles together, which we'll be doing in just a couple minutes when the ceremony begins. You can also use the chat to ask any technical questions you might have. And I'd like to also leverage the chat now to share any hopes you have for this session. What are you hoping for yourself by showing up here today? And maybe also, where you're calling in from. Although I know it's most of you are from New York, so it's great to see you all. And then for closed captioning, you can always select this button and be able to see the word stream across the screen, which is helpful in many cases. Now, I do also what we've been doing during this specific time in our history. We've been sharing what kind of space this is and what kind of space this is not. We really want to make sure that everyone who's participating in a space are aligned on certain principles that make this space safe. And so these are the principles that you're free to adopt in your own communities, but this is how we've chosen to create this container. So this is a grieving space. Despite our varied backgrounds and beliefs, we can unite in sorrow. This is a compassionate space. Our compass points towards mourning loss and always widening our hearts with love. Now, this one is important. This is a brave space. In a time where fear is rampant, simply by you showing up with and for others today, people from diverse walks of life, by being here, that is an act of courage in the world. This is also an imperfect space. This is important to mention as well. It's important to acknowledge our limitations and to say that we approach with humility, knowing that our words might fall short. We know that, and so many people right now are trying to get everything just right. We know we cannot do that. Now, what is this space not? This is not a blaming space. Today is simply being with ourselves and others amidst what's hard. Now, this one's also challenging. It is not a political space. While every action in and inaction can be viewed through the lens of politics, our intention is to step beyond those boundaries and to be apolitical. Also, while we are here with folks of different backgrounds, we have reverends, pastors here. Myself, I am the descendant of Holocaust survivors. While religion provides solace for many, our gathering here, it remains neutral, respecting all faiths and also people of no faith. And finally, this is not a solution space. Our gathering is about bearing witness to our collective pain, and for this time together, not feeling the need to seek immediate remedies or to solve anything. So those, my friends, are the principles around which we gather today. And this is an opportunity, if for some reason you don't feel you can hold those principles in your heart, you're very welcome to use the law of 2 feet or one Zoom button and do something else with your time. But for those of you that opt in to these principles, thank you so much for being here with us today and for this very, very sacred space that we are co-creating with all of you. Now, again, I have the great privilege of playing some music for you today. I'm here to mourn all that's disconnected from love. And also, I'll be honoring my dear friend Sarah, who I had the privilege of playing music for by her bedside for the 2 years prior to her death. And I'm grateful to share some of that music with you here today. I want to thank my colleague, Derek Hosberg, for the gorgeous altar. We always build an altar to serve as the centerpiece, even in a digital space, the center of this space. And then you heard from the wonderful Lisa Cowan. Thank you so much, Lisa. And now we're about to begin our candle lighting ceremony. And then you're going to hear some reflections from Reverend Emma Jordan Simpson. Reverend Mark Fowler is going to lead us in the honor ceremony, and then a candle extinguishing. We're going to do a closing together, and then we're going to host, it says optional breakouts, but we really, really want everyone to stay for the breakouts. It's part of the experience if you're willing to share with one another what's come up for you and talk about some of your challenges and opportunities as leaders in your own communities around this experience. And then we'll say goodbye. So with that, now is the time to grab our candles. And I want to invite everyone in this moment to find a match if you have one handy and to light whatever candle you have handy. Now I'd like to invite 3 Reimagine colleagues, Andy, Dara, and Misha, each to read this candle lighting blessing 3 times, or each to read it 1 time to equal 3. And I invite all of you to read along wherever you are with us out loud. Even though we cannot hear your voice, you're on mute at this time, it does create the sense of solidarity in your space. So, Andy.
By lighting our candles, we mourn division, terrorism, murder, war, trauma, hatred, and all that is disconnected from love. We honor our personal dead, the dead across the world, and all of us still here together.
By lighting our candles, we mourn division, terrorism, murder, war, trauma, hatred, and all that is disconnected from love. We honor our personal dead, the dead across the world, and all of us still here together.
By lighting our candles, we mourn division, terrorism, murder, war, trauma, hatred, and all that is disconnected from love. We honor our personal dead, the dead across the world, and all of us still here together.
Brad, unmute.
Thanks, Andy. I'd love to invite everyone. Do you have candles? Let's see if you have candles. If you do, great time to hold up a candle. And if not, it's okay. This is a moment in the proceedings where it's just really nice to move into gallery view and find somebody you do not know who is in the space with us, and just make some eye contact with that person and think inside your heart to find some loving intention that you can share with that one person. You can mouse over a screen and see the person's name appear. I'm going to focus on Christy, and just share. You find whoever you calls out to you, and just share some loving intention in your mind for that person. We'll take about 15 seconds or so just to meditate on that intention. Now, thank you, everyone. It's so powerful to think about now that intention you just held for that one person, what it would be like to send that intention out, not just to this one person, but to the entire world in need of the kind of loving kindness that you likely just shared forth in your own hearts. So thank you, Christy. So with that, we can put our candles by our sides and leave them lit for the remainder of this time together. And what we like to do in these moments is to hold space through what we call a sacred conversation. Amidst the vigil, it's really nice to have a spontaneous interaction with somebody that brings the humanity into the space and shows the kind of dialogue that we believe is possible in moments like this. And so for today, we are just so honored that our partner from Auburn Seminary, Dr. Emma Jordan Simpson, a Reverend, has indeed agreed to join us. She serves as the president of Auburn Seminary, and Auburn is a leadership development and research institute that equips bold and resilient leaders of faith and moral courage to build communities, bridge divides, pursue justice, and heal the world. Both Reverend Emma and Auburn have collaborated with Reimagine in many past events. Emma preached her first sermon at the age of just 17. She and her husband live in Brooklyn and are the proud parents of 3 amazing children. And really, Emma is in so many ways a main inspiration for why we are gathering this group together today. You who have joined us, small in numbers, but mighty in your heart and spirit, to just bear witness and join together in co-creating this space, and maybe finding some things we can take away for ourselves and for our communities. Now, I want to begin, Emma, just welcoming you. Hello.
Hello, hello. Thank you, Andy. You know, this is one of my favorite places. It's been so meaningful for me. The times that I've been certainly participating, but also when I've just come seeking my own solace. I'm grateful for this space. So thank you.
And so thank you. And before we get into it, we just lit candles. We're going to be doing an honor and emotion ceremony later on in the program, where we will have the chance to share, each share who in our hearts we are honoring today and what emotions we're feeling. I'm wondering if you would like to share the emotions that are coming up for you and who or what you are honoring in this space today.
Yes, and I'm going to share something that I don't often get a chance to share, being a leader, and not just at Auburn Seminary, but also at my church here in Brooklyn. I'm holding some grace and space for myself today. I have really been brokenhearted. And I lost my brother at around the same time that a little bit before October 7th, I lost my brother. It stirred up so many generational traumatic memories in my family, and what it means to carry all of that and still try to show up every day with people and show up in a spirit of love. That's hard. And Bell Hooks, I think it was Bell Hooks who once said that, that love really is giving to yourself also what you imagine and dream for others. And I have found that I've needed to do that, is to give myself space and grace and be, stay in my own body during this experience. So I'm bringing into this space Emma Jordan Simpson.
Well, welcome, Emma Jordan Simpson. We are so grateful to have you in this space and to hold and honor you in this space, along with everyone else who has showed up here this afternoon or wherever in the world you are right now. I'm curious, in this moment that we're in, and we're going to ask this of everyone later on in the breakouts, but curious for you in your own experience and what you've seen with others, but maybe starting with yourself, what are some of the challenges that you've seen around how to respond to the grief of this moment?
Mhm, mhm. First, I think what many people are carrying, certainly myself, is more than the grief of this moment. And I think we're carrying grief that doesn't get an opportunity to metastasize. It feels like it's just piled one on top of the other. And what I have seen with leaders in this time has been it's the loss of executive functioning. People can't get themselves organized. They can't remember where they put this, and it literally, the loss of executive functioning, the short-term memory, the indications that this is being held in the body. I've also seen, just a lack of grace given to oneself. It is so hard to give yourself what you give to others. And I think that's what leaders try to do. And it leaves people giving from empty wells. It leaves them giving from something other than the wells of their own spirituality, because they don't get a chance to feed and to cultivate that. But what I have seen are folks who have been walking together, doing work together, subverting the world order together for a decade, who have not been able to have a conversation together, and who are broken and loving one another, but not being able to even talk together.
Yeah. And so, given that, I know that this space that we're co-creating with all of you that joined us today, for you feels like an important offering, an important thing to do, to come together and mourn collectively, through ritual, through words, through music, through creativity. I wonder if you can speak to why you feel this is an important use of our time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. just in the time, that we've lit our candles, I know I feel a reconnection to my own humanity. And I think it's important for leaders not to see themselves so much the way that others wish that they would be, we want our leaders to be super people, Superman and Superwoman, to have that cape and, the breastplate of steel. And those expectations disconnect us from so many things, reality, perception, and also our humanity. When people are afraid to lament and to cry, when the world really needs for us to lament and to cry, that's dangerous. And that reconnection to humanity, to your own humanity, to your frailness, to the fact that you don't know everything, that you don't need to know everything, that what that does is gives you the opportunity to sit with people for whom your presence matters more than your words, and to walk with people who need your courageous companionship, and to forgive yourself. Because I think leaders have this idea that, well, when this happens, I know I'll say this, or I'll do this, or I'll show up in this way. And the truth of the matter is that doesn't happen. Sometimes it does, but it doesn't happen. And I don't consider that to be a leadership failure. I consider that to be, we are human beings. And our leadership is demonstrated not just in one moment, but over a lifetime. It's what, W.E.B. Du Bois talks about, second by second, moment by moment, day by day, month by month, year by year, until our living has made a lifetime, worth of living. Yeah, the most important thing I think I have been saying to people the last couple of months is, you're human.
Yeah, and it feels so resonant to me, the idea that if you're telling people you're human, how do we really feel that in a world where we're so busy and so inundated and so much is on our plates to try to respond in the best way possible amidst circumstances that no one's figured out? What if we could simply invite people of all walks of life or our own communities into a place where we can be human? And I think what is human often is this vulnerability, uh,
Mhm.
this vulnerability around expressing the emotions that are often so contained.
Mhm.
We have to keep within our chests. Uh,
Mhm.
and sorrow and pain, those are emotions that we don't bring into the workplace. Uh,
Yeah.
and getting expressed, it feels like right now, is often on, maybe we see social media posts, we see expressions of, and we see violence in the world,
Mhm.
much bigger expressions of our pain that
Mhm.
manifest. And so I'm
Mhm.
wondering, from you, let's just dream for a second
Mhm.
and imagine that as a response to global catastrophes or events that would now in our over, so it's such a connected world, that something that happens on the other side of the globe feels like it's right in my face. It's personal because that is the information that is entering my brain space. And as you mentioned, that is on top of all of the other personal losses
Yeah.
that we each experience, the compounding nature of loss. Now, let's imagine that we were all collectively able to take pause and mourn collectively and lament, as you so beautifully shared. What do you think that would do for the world?
Mm. Oh my. I think that anytime when you take a deep breath, you stop, as you step out of traffic, you stop and you take a deep breath. What you dream about, what you think about after you've had the opportunity to take a deep breath, I think connects you more to love. Like, how can we respond in love? How can we walk? When you breathe, like you have a body. Much of what is so just confounding about social media is just how disembodied the vitriol is. It's like it's just this thing out there, and you can say whatever because you're not connected to your body and you don't feel the real matter, of other people as beings, as bodies, as fragile. And but here I imagine that people who have the opportunity to do that, who build practices around that, would have bigger imaginations, ones that even include who they might consider to be their enemies. I had a table conversation last week, and the question was, what should we be doing differently? And one person answered this question by saying, we need to know our enemies and we need to vanquish our enemies. And it was just going in on who these enemies were. And I didn't say very much at the table. And finally someone said, well, Emma, what do you think? And I said, well, I think what we should be doing differently is maybe pushing for a bigger imagination, one that includes everyone. The dream that we have for ourselves is what we can be, lifting up space, to include everyone. But you don't get that if it's the reaction, the immediate reaction, the response is the right now. And of course, it feels totally unrealistic. It feels totally fantastical, you know? And it also feels, for leaders, it feels absolutely necessary. Like, how will you, as a leader, take a moment to step back and take a deep breath? Because what's at stake are the people that you are leading. And that's a prophetic breath.
Mhm.
I also think that taking that moment gives us the opportunity to think about, what does the world really need right now? What do my people really need right now? And when you're among people who have forgotten how to cry, who've forgotten how to grieve for what they see unfolding, before them, who've forgotten how to lament, or maybe they didn't even know, then the thing for us to do as leaders is to cry, is to lament, is to feel, is to grieve with our people, for our people. And that's not a knee-jerk reaction.
Mm. And I think what we've seen, to your point, is that there's few spaces for that practice.
Mhm.
There are our sacred religious spaces that are often held for that, but in kind of broad public cultural
Mhm.
space, it feels like we don't have the opportunity, the invitation to fill in a place with our pain, where that can be expressed as a real honest response. And
Yeah.
so part of the other challenge, and I'll just share with everyone here, it's like, what is the invitation
Mhm.
and because it's like, oh, what are we mourning? And then
Mhm.
all of a sudden the mourning becomes political.
Mhm.
And so the way that we have tried to address that collectively in this space today with all of you is by simply saying, let's mourn all that is disconnected from love.
Yes.
And it's something that we can all get behind. It's
Yes.
not, there's no, it's almost crazy. It's like that is the one last sacred, nonpartisan thing we have. It used to be, I used to say after 9/11, oh, why do we need a 9/11 to bring people together,
Mhm.
which happened for, a couple weeks in the United States of America.
Yeah.
People smiled at their neighbors. Now it feels like even tragedy can't bring people together.
Mhm.
So what is the level of abstraction at which we can go that really still we can cling on to as something we can all hold in our hearts? And I feel like that disconnection from love and the
Mhm.
yearning for love, which is often at the root of all of our pain anyway, is the place that is the neutral territory that we can really just stand in.
Yes. Yes. You know, it is, but it's a big world and it's such a small world. And I think about how I was feeling on 9/11. You know, I had my middle school daughter with me on that day, and I get trying to be a comfort for her, but also trying to figure out, oh my God, what am I going to do to get home? But I think about, for instance, the technology that was available to me, and now you think about the technology that's available to everyone, and instantaneously the images, the everything is coming at you like, you know, like a snowball. Uh, and uh, and it's hard to observe, to consume all of that. It's hard um, to have perspective even in this big world that is really so much smaller. And the thing is, my hope is that the smallness grows in a different way. Um, that we get to the point where we see that Thich Nhat Hanh is right. And he said that we suffer from the delusion of separateness. So that there's nothing that affects me that's not going to have an impact on you. And there's nothing that is shaping how you live your life that's not going to have an impact on me. And I think we would dream differently. We would imagine differently if we were to stretch in that way and to see that this radical connection that we have with one another. And I pray for the people who are caught up in the, you know, the right now, because of all that is happening. And I pray that our world keeps getting smaller, that it gets smaller, so that we do get the opportunity to escape that delusion that we don't have to care, because we do.
Well, Emma, thank you so much for um, being my partner in and really being the stalwart of this sacred conversation that we're hosting. Creativity. I just want to end with this. Creativity is a very important part of these experiences because there's other ways of communicating. There's the dialogue we were just in, and we also want to model. There's music, there's poetry, there's other ways of accessing these parts of ourselves. And I know that you had a poem that you curated for us today, and I would love to invite you to share that poem with all of us.
Yes, this poem is called "The Cure for Sorrow," and it was written by Jan Richardson. And I often turn to Jan Richardson because she speaks in blessings and poems, and they are absolutely life altering. But this poem comes from a book called The Cure for Sorrow, a book of blessings for times of grief. And so here are these words. Because I do not know any medicine for grief, but to let ourselves grieve. Because I do not know any cure for sorrow, but to let ourselves sorrow. Because I do not know any remedy, but to let the heart break, to let it fall open, then let it fall open still more. Because I do not know how to mend the unmendable, unfixable, unhealable wound that keeps finding itself healed as we tend it, as we follow the line of it, as we let it lead us on the path it knows. Because I do not know any solace, but to give ourselves into the love that will never cease to find us, that will never loose its hold on us, that will never abandon us to the sorrow for which it holds the cure.
Emma Jordan Simpson, thank you so much for such an exquisite set of reflections on your own heart and on this moment, on the moments, and for sharing that gorgeous poem with us as well. It was just really breathtaking and really encapsulates so much of the spirit of what you were already sharing. So thank you. And now we move from the sacred conversation and some poetry to another really important part that we've seen as an effective element of one of these vigils, and that is to invite somebody into our space who has thought about a reflection that leads us. It's less of a conversation, more of a narrative offering that leads us into the honor ceremony, where we're all going to have the chance to share who or what we are honoring today and the emotions that are arising that we want to let go of or to process in this space. And so for that, I'd like to introduce Reverend Mark Fowler, CEO of Tannenbaum, to lead the next part of this gathering. Mark guides Tannenbaum to fulfill its mission to promote justice and build respect for religious difference by transforming individuals and institutions to reduce prejudice, to reduce hatred, and to stem violence. He represents Tannenbaum on the United Nations Multi-Faith Advisory Council for the UN Interagency Task Force on Religion and Development, the CEO Action for Diversity and Inclusion, the Inclusion Allies Coalition, and Interfaith United New York City. It is so wonderful to have you here with us. Before we opened up the experience today, Mark just shared some words just for the folks who are going to be presenting today. And I can already say just how grateful we are to have your presence shine so brightly in this space.
Thank you so much, Brad. So I got what I came for because I've had my deep breath. So now everything else is gravy as far as I'm concerned. And I really do appreciate and thank you for the invitation to come and be with you. And I pretty much do what Emma Jordan Simpson tells me to do. Those who are smart are obedient when they are called. And I appreciate so much all of your reflections. I just wanted to share a couple of things. So, and Emma, I thank you for everything that you shared. I saw that you were going to be sharing something from Jan Richardson, and I also will be just ending with another piece from that same book, which has moved me. So I want to just take a step back to the pandemic. And my mother was someone who had COVID in March of 2020. And we took her to the hospital, and then they came out of the examination room and said, we're admitting your mother. And we were like, well, can we say anything? They're like, no, we're admitting her and taking her to her room. And I did not see her again for 10 days. And it was 2 or 3 days before they were able to get the phone set up in her room. So all we had were the people on the floor who would tell us how things were going, but we knew the state that we left her in and could not hear her voice. And I remember then she recovered, she came out of the hospital. I stayed with her for a few months until she kind of got back on her feet. And I remember hearing something on the television about the beginning of the conversation about masks and whether people would wear them and this, that, and the other thing. And I remember as I was thinking about how COVID was turned from a condition to an epidemic to a pandemic. And yet, it was not big enough. Take loose the idea of what I want. And not what I need, but what I want. Almost like you would speak to a 3-year-old, and the world could not move beyond that. And my heart broke at that moment because I found myself asking the question, well, what is it going to take? What is it going to take? And I still don't have an answer for that. I don't know. At Tannenbaum, we're a secular and non-sectarian not-for-profit. I'm an interfaith and interspiritual minister. And our work really has been, since October the 8th, has been responding to all of our constituents as they are going through, whether it's in workplaces or healthcare institutions and schools, our peacemakers around the world, because the war between Israel and Hamas is not just between Israel and Hamas. It is felt throughout the world, as are all wars. To one degree or another, there are people who feel them around the world, but we don't all feel them at the same time. When we talk about collective grief and collective mourning, we often don't have the space, or the container is not created for the sharing of grief. The container is usually created for the not even witnessing of grief, but almost kind of like a dispassionate viewing, like you'd watch a movie or a television show, but not the opportunity to feel the grief and walk in the grief and talk in the grief together. I found myself in the first weeks after the declaration of war and after the assault on Israeli citizens, just not knowing what was going on. I spent so much time trying to just wrap my mind around what, because it felt different and I couldn't give language as to why. So I found myself with so many questions and everyone wanting an answer, an immediate answer that I did not have. And eventually some things came to me. I am, the things that I'm interested in now is I'm interested in making a declaration and a decision that we're actually not interested in war as being the answer, or even a part of the last resort. I'm curious about what's the human and spiritual evolution to take place such that war is no longer a part of an answer. I'm interested in that. I don't have an answer for it, but I'm interested in that. Because the thing that I found interesting is that there's so much of a discussion of the rules of war that there doesn't seem to be any discussion about how and why war becomes our answer. Because that just leaves us with more questions, no matter how it turns out. I'm interested in what I looked up while, Emma, while you were talking. So Professor James Banks, who was an education professor and a social justice educator for many, many years. And he had this idea of stages of cultural identity typology. And basically, he kind of laid out, how do we move from what he called at its root cultural psychological captivity, where we can only respond at the basest understandings of ourselves, to this concept called globalism and global competency, where we really do know that what happens around the planet to that stillborn child happens to us. That there is no separation. And that we move in the world with that as our foundational understanding. Not just that we're not alone, but that we are inextricably connected. And that nothing happens in our absence or without impact on us. So I'm interested in that. And I'm really interested in the bigger picture and the bigger construction of what holds all of this in place. And when I say all of this, I mean, when I think about the ways in which we can demean one another and dismiss one another, that is not new, and it is not particular to any particular group of people. And I find us very much as a humanity maybe not able yet to really pull apart the structure that keeps that in place, such that it's almost kind of like understandable that we treat each other the way that we do. And that there is a structure to it. There's a way that it happens. And I'm interested in us starting to dig into that a little bit more. Because our individual paths and traditions contribute in various ways, but ultimately, we're the ones, boots on the ground, hands toward each other, that bring these things to life, that make theory and theological intention reality. So those are some of the things that I'm interested in. I want to conclude just by sharing this piece. So this is another poem from The Cure for Sorrow. And let me just say one last thing. We did a session in June of 2020 at Tannenbaum called Grief and Mourning in Times of Crisis. And at the moment, the crisis was the pandemic. And I invited Reverend Diane Burke, who's the founder and the spiritual director of One Spirit Interfaith Seminary and One Spirit Learning Alliance, to participate in that session. We also had another person, a reverend from the board of the National Association of Mental Illness. And Diane said something that day that has never left me, and I've been sharing it with our various constituents, is that there is a difference between grief and mourning. And we use the words interchangeably, but they're different experiences. And I understand mourning to be the outer expression. It's the thing that you're more likely to see in the immediacy of a loss. They are the tears, the screaming, the inability to be around, to touch people, to just all of the things that are the outer experience of the loss. But the grief is the internal journey. It's both those feelings and thoughts you have when you're by yourself and in your dreams, and many times the things that don't actually get out. They live in the mind and they live in the body. And that when grief comes, and it will come, but whenever grief comes, it reactivates grief that we thought we were done with. And so while we say that we're grieving about this particular instance, we really are pulling in everything that is yet unhealed. And kind of like healing is like a scorecard, like, oh, I'm past that. I did my work on that. I'm done with that. But yeah, maybe not your heart and maybe not your spirit is done with that, but your head is, or you'd like to think so. So I want to share this piece. And after this, I would just invite everyone to just enter into the chat the name of loved ones or losses, any feelings, just whatever's present as we take this journey of grief and mourning together. So this poem is called The Blessing You Should Not Tell Me. And this is also by Jan Richardson. Do not tell me there will be a blessing in the breaking, that it will ever be a grace to wake into this life so altered, this world so without. Do not tell me of the blessing that will come in the absence. Do not tell me that what does not kill me will make me strong, or that God will not send me more than I can bear. Do not tell me this will make me more compassionate, more loving, more holy. Do not tell me this will make me more grateful for what I had. Do not tell me I was lucky. Do not even tell me there will be a blessing. Give me instead the blessing of breathing with me. Instead, the blessing of sitting with me when you cannot think of what to say. Give me instead the blessing of asking about him, how we met, or what I loved most about the life we have shared. Ask for a story or tell me one, because a story is finally the only place on earth he lives now. If you could know what grace lives in such a blessing, you would never cease to offer it. If you could, sweetness that abide there, you would never wonder if there was a blessing you could give that would be better than this. The blessing of your own heart, opened and beating with mine. And the chat is available to enter the names of anyone that you would like to remember, anyone of loved ones, any losses you'd like to acknowledge, feelings that you'd like us to hold with you.
Thank you to everyone so much for sharing these names, these ideas, these emotions um, into the chat just now. Though the official ceremony is over and the music has stopped, your music through your words and shares can persist. No need to stop sharing if something comes into your heart. This chat is open and available for you and for all of us to witness together our shared sense of humanity in our grief and our mourning. So thank you also to Mark Fowler for such a beautiful share and such a wonderful way to usher us into that honor ceremony by highlighting the idea of curiosity and interest. Nothing definitive, but places to look, things to explore in our hearts. And it's with that type of curiosity that we want to hold this space for all of us together to sit together, because we don't have the answers. This, again, is not a solution space. This is a space to be. And so with that, I'd like to, and maybe because we are a small group, which is actually quite wonderful, we can do whatever breakout we want to do right here together. This is our breakout into life, and we can have a conversation with all of us in a second. Why don't we, from this last session where we're going to move from that to this, we do have one final, or from this to that rather, we do have one final element of our ceremony together that is more of a formal in nature, and that is our candle extinguishing ceremony. So I am going to pull back up this prayer and invite Mark, Emma, and Lisa back together to read this one time each, and then at the count of 3 thereafter, I'll count down and we can all collectively simultaneously extinguish our candles. Now, if you want to keep your candle lit for whatever reason and let it extinguish on its own accord, there's no pressure. And also, if you don't have a candle, this is just a great opportunity as we extinguish our candles at the end of this 3 blessings to just take that breath and to share with us that breath of energy and release that to the world to mean really what is paraphrased in what we're about to share with you all. So, Mark.
Extinguishing our candles, we release light into our world to keep alive hope and the memories of those we honor today and tomorrow and for the rest of our lives.
By extinguishing our candles, we release light into our world to keep alive hope and the memories of those we honor today and tomorrow and for the rest of our lives.
By extinguishing our candles, we release light into our world to keep alive hope and the memories of those who we honor today and tomorrow and for the rest of our lives.
3, 2, 1. Come out one more breath collectively as a community. Take a deep breath in and out.